The restaurant was the kind of place where silence felt expensive. Crystal glasses caught the light like frozen stars, and the soft piano music drifted just loud, enough to remind you that you didn't belong unless you could afford to ignore it. Every table was dressed in white linen, every guest dressed in quiet confidence. This was not a place for mistakes, and definitely not a place for shouting. Yet that was exactly what happened. Don't eat that food. The words tore through the room like a glass shattering. Forks froze midair. Conversations collapsed into gasps. The pianist's hands slipped off the keys, leaving a hollow echo behind. Every head turned toward the source of the voice. It came from the far side of the room near the service entrance, where a man in a worn black uniform stood breathing hard. His apron was stained with grease that no amount of washing could fully remove. His hair was neatly combed, but exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. One arm was still holding a tray. The other was stretched out toward the center table, palm open in desperation. He was a waiter, a poor one by the look of him, and he had just shouted at the richest woman in the room. At the center table sat Victoria Hale. Her name alone carried weight. CEO, investor, philanthropist, the kind of woman whose signature could change markets and whose silence could ruin careers. She wore a tailored emerald dress, elegant and effortless, and a diamond bracelet that probably cost more than the waiter's yearly salary. Her fork hovered inches above her plate. The dish was art disguised as food: seared salmon, glossy sauce, edible flowers placed with surgical precision. A meal prepared by the restaurant's most celebrated chef. Victoria slowly looked up, her sharp gray eyes locking onto the man who had dared to interrupt her. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice calm but cold enough to cut. The manager was already rushing forward, his face pale. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Hale. He's new. He didn't mean." "I said," the waiter repeated, his voice shaking now but still loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't eat that food." A ripple of whispers spread through the room. The manager grabbed the waiter's arm. "Are you trying to get a suit? Apologize, now." The man pulled his arm free. "I can't," he said. "Not if she eats it." Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You have exactly 10 seconds, she said evenly, "to explain why I shouldn't call security and have you thrown out." The waiter swallowed. His eyes flicked briefly toward the kitchen doors, then back to her plate. "My name is Daniel," he said, "and that sauce's wrong." A scoff came from another table. Someone laughed under their breath. The head chef stormed out of the kitchen, his face red with fury. "That dish is perfect," he snapped. "I made it myself." Daniel shook his head. "Not tonight. Not with that batch." The manager's voice dropped into a furious whisper. "Daniel, you're done. You're fired." At that word, something changed in Daniel's expression. Fear. Yes, but also resolve. The kind that comes from having nothing left to lose. "I know I'm fired," he said quietly, "but I also know what happens if she eats that." Victoria's fingers tightened around her fork. "And what exactly do you think will happen?" Daniel took a step closer, ignoring the manager's attempt to stop him. "I worked in food safety before this," he said. "Before my wife died. Before medical bills and daycare costs and rent pushed me into taking any job I could get." The room grew quieter. "I know how sauces break," he continued. "How cream reacts when it's been reheated to fast. I saw your plate sit under the heat lamp longer than it should have. I smelled it when I brought it out." The chef crossed his arms. "You're saying my food is dangerous." Daniel met his glare. "I'm saying that if she eats that sauce, there's a strong chance it's contaminated." A sharp intake of breath echoed somewhere in the room. Victoria's expression shifted not to fear, but to calculation. "Contaminated how?" Daniel hesitated. "Bacteria. The kind that can cause severe reactions, especially if someone has a compromised immune system. That did it." Victoria stood up so suddenly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "How would you know anything about my health?" she demanded. Daniel's voice softened. "Because you're not the first person I've seen like this." Security guards had entered the room now, hovering near the walls. The manager pointed. "Take him out?" Victoria raised a hand. "Wait." The guards froze. She stepped closer to Daniel, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "My daughter," she said quietly, "nearly died from food poisoning 3 years ago." Daniel's eyes widened just slightly. "Then you understand why I couldn't stay quiet." The room held its breath. Victoria looked down at her plate. Then, without breaking eye contact with Daniel, she pushed it away. "Call a lab," she said to the manager. "Test it." The chef exploded. "This is ridiculous." "Do it," Victoria snapped. Minutes stretched like hours. The dish was taken away. Another was prepared, untouched by the original batch. Daniel was escorted to the side, not out, but not free either. He stood there, heart pounding, thinking of his 6-year-old son asleep at home, probably clutching the old stuffed bear Daniel couldn't afford to replace. He had already lost his job. If this went wrong, he might lose everything else too. When the manager returned, his face was gray. "There was contamination," he said quietly. The sauce had spoiled. The restaurant erupted into chaos. The chef collapsed into a chair. Guests whispered furiously. Phones came out. The story was already escaping into the world. Victoria closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them, she looked at Daniel not as a waiter, not as an employee, but as a man. "You saved my life," she said. Daniel shook his head. "I just did what anyone should." She studied him. Most people wouldn't have. The manager stammered, "Ms. Hale, about his termination." "He's not fired," she said. "He's promoted." The room went silent again. "Effective immediately," Victoria continued. "This man will be hired as a safety consultant for this establishment. And tomorrow morning, he'll be meeting with my company's health and compliance team." Daniel stared at her. "I don't understand." Victoria smiled, just slightly. "I invest in people who speak up when it's hard, especially when they have something to lose." Tears burned in Daniel's eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. She nodded. "Go home," she said. "Be with your son. Tomorrow, your life changes." As Daniel walked out of the restaurant, not escorted, but respected, the whispers followed him. Not mocking now, wondering. Outside, the city air felt different, lighter. He pulled out his phone and texted his babysitter that he'd be home early. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that shouting in a room full of rich people hadn't ruined his life. It had saved it. And somewhere behind him, in a restaurant that would never forget his voice, a powerful woman sat staring at an untouched plate, realizing that sometimes the loudest warnings come from the people we're trained not to listen to.